Good
Sweet.
evening, everyone. This is Skinny E Media here to present you yet another brilliant podcast, BBFC versus MPAA. But this time we're doing it a little bit differently. We're going to be talking about music. Yep, you heard it. Either be it songs or the music videos that go along with it, and the controversies that followed alongside it as well. And here we have Bobatron, aka Rob Bavister.
Hey,
How do you
hey.
do?
I'm good.
Um,
How are you?
I'm all right myself. Certainly, you got me at the right time there. This one's going to be a little bit more unusual because the subject matter is not necessarily related to films. But if you want to include musicals, or music-based films like Pink Floyd's The Wall or Metallica's Through the Never, you're more than welcome to. But what is your experience with music censorship? I mean, you
Well,
often hear like the bleeps and stuff, and they will cut a bit
well, I mean,
out.
that's shooting fish in a barrel. That's low hanging fruit to start off right now. I mean, I think we need to deal with the elephant in the room, and of course, that is the PMRC.
Parents, music.
Music Resource Center. Yeah, with founded or spearheaded by Tipper Gore in the 80s.
You're
Which
absolutely right.
we had
I
a, she
know.
had a. Oh, sorry, yeah, I just want to acknowledge, but I need got a fair bit to get through because she had a filthy 15. I can't remember all of them, but there was Wasp's Animal Fuck You Like a Beast and Twisted Sisters Under the Blade. Um, I, of course, am a big heavy metal fan. I know, Mark, you're not more into electronica and everything, but both these types of music have been had the censors knickers in a twist and everything, had the moral guardians clutching their pearls for quite a few decades now, as I'm certain you're aware.
Yes. Well, they've been finding ways to clamp down on metal music as well, probably even a little more so hip hop and R&B and other pop genres, more or less.
Madonna
Because they.
Madonna rubbed Madonna rubbed them a bit the wrong way at times due to her rather quote unquote blasphemous imagery in her Like a Prayer video.
Oh yes, definitely. I know some people really got in a tizzy about that because the mix of religion and race in the
But yeah,
um
but
video in question,
yeah,
and
but the
then
point
as
I wanted to get through. Sorry. Uh,
no, go ahead.
all right. Well, the point I want to get to is PMRC thing because it is quite funny. Because Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, I take it you are familiar with Twisted Sister. I'm correct.
I've heard of some of their songs. It's been so long ago.
Well, they are
Uh,
an old-fashioned band. I don't think. Well, I think it's split up ages ago, and these been going solo. But anyway, he was called in front of Congress or the Senate. I can't remember which in America to testify on behalf of the music industry and the music artists. And most of the other artists who went in, like Frank Zappa and whatnot, did actually make an effort to dress up, but he just didn't. He came in dressed up in his stage wear, like with his skin tight jeans, his denim jacket, his big tousled hair, his concert T-shirt, and instead of makeup on from previous night's gig he'd been playing. And he just went in there with a little speech written down on a note and had in his pocket, and he just tore their freaking argument apart. I mean, on the song he's defending, "Under the Blade," and I think you can tell it from its title, clearly about surgery, and he wrote it about the throat surgery that their band's guitarist was going in for, and the fear it was instilling in him. Tipper Gore thought it was about sadomasochism, and when Dee Snider explained that it was clearly about surgery, Al Gore, who was there as well, asked them basically, is it at all possible that it could be misinterpreted as sadomasochism? And Snyder basically said, well, there's a level of subjectivity in these lyrics, depending on who's reading them and who's listening. Obviously, Tipper Gore had sadomasochism on her mind when she was reading the lyrics, and that's what she read about. Oh boy, it's just awesome how he just threw the accusations back at him to say, yeah, Tipper Gore's got a dirty mind. What can I say?
I would say the ones who often like to point the finger at the musicians or the artists for alleged materials or whatnot probably have certain inclinations themselves. One could argue people who go on about the LGBT agenda probably are themselves a bit homosexual to begin with, but they won't openly
there's
admit
that
it.
the old canard of like the closeted homophobe and everything. You could say that about anything. I mean, just like outward homophobes watch a lot of gay porn, outward racists probably watch a lot of interracial porn, but that's not what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss music. I've said quite a bit for what I wanted to say. So over to you, Mark.
Well, in my experience with music censorship, be it the songs and music videos in question, was mostly through MTV. Now, as we talked on the side, I know you didn't really have it growing up, but I started watching it a lot of times because I like a lot of the videos in question. But there were certain ones that I couldn't really see growing up that everyone else could, and they talked about the schools and whatnot, like Prodigy smacked my bitch up, and Bjork's "I Love You," which was on her album Post. And I'm a big fan of Bjork, but there was, for some reason, that was one particular scene which involves her ripping a chicken in half. And it was animated, and it also shows sort of like cartoon bouncing boobs, although it's done like in sort of bubble sort of form, which in a way is a bit unusual, a bit weird. That's probably where I get a bit of my weird kinks from. But actually, I think it was a funny thing, but yeah, I couldn't see that growing up. I couldn't even see Duran Duran's Girls on Film until I accidentally saw it at 13. It was on FHM Music TV, which aired on at night after QTV, and they show all the nudity and whatnot and stuff. And I thought, okay, I hope they don't know I'm watching this now. And then obviously, we all know about the PMRC or RIAA classifications that they always put on CDs and vinyls. Parental advisory, explicit lyrics. Now,
which do more to sell for them.
Oh yes, definitely. I would say it does more to help the artist than it does to hurt it, unless you're Dixie Chicks.
Well, yeah, I mean,
in a flip side, because they were criticized for speaking up against George Bush.
Well, yeah,
and it destroyed their career.
Yeah, I mean, during the early 2000s, when nu metal was at its peak and everything, which is a genre of music I was very fond with, probably had most influence on me. Of course,
I love nu metal too.
Yeah, well, fair enough. I mean, I reckon that's good. I reckon it's contrary to what people said at the time. I reckon it has stood the test of time. But the three biggest bands at the time were Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, and Slipknot. And of course, when I saw like the Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory, I noticed it was missing a parental advisory sticker. So it's like, what the fuck? It's like, because obviously Limp Bizkit and Slipknot clearly had it on there and they just reveled in that shit. I mean, have you heard Limp Bizkit's Chocolate Starfish album?
I never owned it, but I did get the library one time because I like the crazy album cover. It also had Rollin' and a few other songs on it. I love a lot of... I'll put it bluntly. Fred Durst is the funniest rapper that isn't a rapper I've ever heard, aside from Mike Skinner.
Rapper, yes, in inverted quotes, I would say. He's not a good rapper, but I think that's fair to say that.
Well, it's, nu metal, for anyone who's curious and is a lot younger than us, it mixes sort of hip-hop elements with rock and metal music to create something that's a bit, how do I put it, edgy and postmodern. It has to be you have to be of a certain generation to appreciate. People who grew up in the 90s and early 2000s will certainly know that sort of sound there. And they put like the weird scratches and turntables and then put in the loud guitars and whatnot. Rage Against the Machine did this first off, and then Faith No More. And then Limp Bizkit would toy around with it and make it more
commercial.
Stick in the head, oh, dude, you never go there, you never go there. Oh, stuck it, fuck him. Go get fucked up. That's my impersonation of him.
Well, he is quite out, personally. But on his that Chocolate Starfish, which is probably the album that sent nu metal into the stratosphere, the opening, well, it's not opening track, the first song, Hot Dog, I mean, just has, I think, like 48 uses of fuck in it, which, of course, just as a teenager at the time being, you just thought was awesome.
Oh, no, I would say that too. Well, me growing up, I actually was never penalized for listening to parental advisory albums. I've heard Papa Roach and Public Enemy and NWA and all those. like as young as 7 or 6. They didn't bleep out the F bits. When I listened to it on tape in my father's car, I just heard it as it was intended. So I never had the stigma with music as song-wise as I did with films or TV. But yes. And also in question, that Chocolate Starfish album was quite funny, but a bit outre because of implies anus. That's what the top Starfish reference is supposed to be, and also Limp Bizkit, for anyone who's curious, is slang for people who jism or cum inside a biscuit and then toss it around with it as if they're like sticking up some woman's vagina.
I always thought it was like several guys sat in a circle wanking onto a biscuit, and whoever's last to come has to eat the biscuit. It's amazing how just casual I just talk about that.
Well, I mean, this is we're going to have a parental advisory warning in of itself. Very strong language, adult themes for the video and podcast in question. But
it goes without saying, really, we are talking about censorship. We are going to cover some issues that are going to, people get the censors in a tizzy. So it's kind of unavoidable, really, at the end of the day, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of people get into uproar about certain songs and music videos and even the album covers in question. Now, the one that comes into mind, now I'm going to sort of compartmentalize it a little bit here because I know we don't share the same taste in genres. But are you familiar with Aphex Twin?
I've heard of them. I don't know anything by them, but I do sound like one of those hardcore electronica dubstep groups that probably do get the censors knickers in a twist. So hey, they're all good in my book.
Well, electronica is more or less faceless. It doesn't have quite the profile that rock, metal, or hip hop artists tend to have. But Aphex Twin was certainly controversial back in my day, mainly because of certain music videos that he did, like Window Licker and Come to Daddy, which have Come to Daddy has a bit of a industrial or metal vibe about it, but it's also very disturbing. The music video has evil children destroying stuff. They filmed it around the same part that they also filmed bits of Clockwork Orange, and there's a monster that comes out of a TV screen and terrorizes an old lady with her fish dinner, screaming at the top of his lungs, and there's all these weird transmogrifications of his face on the television. It just was some sort of surrealist nightmare. And then Window Licker superimposed women's faces with Aphex Twin's face, Richard D. James, to make it disturbing and creepy. And also the opening bit of that music video, if you see it uncut, also has quite a lot of swearing and ethnic slurs. And this is all played for laughs.
Okay, well, the ethnic slurs aren't very cool in my opinion. But sometimes I guess that's what people do. Of course, I was never into much electronic music and everything. My older brothers were. I mean, during the 90s, they were into all that happy hardcore dreamscape stuff. That was rave music, as we knew it as. Don't know if you've ever been familiar with that.
Oh, hell yeah, I am. My mother grew me up on Acid House and Jungle. That was the first music I listened to as a child, like Alternate and some of the early Prodigy and SL2 stuff.
Oh, yeah. Have you seen the film Human Traffic?
Yep. Actually, I remember getting it on DVD one time. I prefer Train Spotting a little bit more, but I actually like that movie. It's set up in Canberra or Wales, weirdly enough.
Yeah, Cardiff. Even though Danny Dye doesn't make a slight attempt to do a Cardiff Welsh accent, just sounds like a Cockney geezer again.
Yeah, no, he's always like that. He's saying the same thing. Look at me, I'm Danny Dye. I'm a geezer. Fuck off, you silly cunt.
I'm not going to lie, though. Watching the film while sober is always quite trying. Because you see them just getting absolutely fucked up on everything under the sun. It's like, God, give me some.
Well, mate, you want to take E. And I know that was a big thing back in the day, to where they put the criminal justice bill to crack down on young people taking acid and ecstasy at raves.
Yeah.
And that caused an uproar. Well, I mean, I don't listen to music while high. I don't even listen to it while drunk. I just like listening for the melodies. That's how I get my high from, and it's legal. You won't have to do a year or two in prison for it.
Well, I think you
But
do it a bit behind the doors. I mean, I've listened to a lot of music while stoned out my brains, and it does make you appreciate it a bit more. But my brother was always going to Bristol to go do all this raving and go see all these DJs, probably like Slipmatt or Psy or DJ Hype, Mickey Finn, whatever. And he'd come back like on his hour in the on a Friday night, off his fucking tits on ecstasy, I think. But no, of course, all that shit got everyone got the censors and a tizzy and everything. I think Prodigy's and their Smack My Bitch Up was very much a crucial part of that sort of culture, which had all the tabloids and the Daily Mail and the tizzy during the 90s. Bearing in mind, Mary Whitehouse was still alive, and of course, the story of Leah Betts and everything.
I'm not too familiar with the Leah Betts one, but I am familiar with the Prodigy stories because Smack My Bitch Up was very controversial, and it had a music video filmed in first-person perspective depicting. You would assume it was a man committing all these acts of violence and sex and orgies and drug use and hooliganism, but it actually turns out it's a woman at the very end. Sorry to give any spoilers there, but it was banned on MTV, or at least they shown it very late at night. I couldn't see it growing up. I certainly knew what it was. I mostly just heard the song in question, which they actually featured in some 12 certificate films or a 15 certificate film. I think it was like on Charlie's Angels. I was like, you what?
Yeah, well, the actual lyrics to the actual song, how many times did I say actual in that sentence? Probably aren't that controversial. It's not like they're dropping a million F-bombs, and if you're not dropping all the F-bombs and everything, I don't really give a shit. But, if you want to, did you want me to fill you in on the whole Leah Betts story?
Go with it.
All right. Well, Leah Betts was this 18-year-old girl who basically took a very bad batch of ecstasy one time on a night out in, I can't remember. I think it was circa 96 or something like that, or it was something in the mid-90s. Anyway, she basically OD'd on a very bad batch of ecstasy, not helped by the fact she was drinking so much she drowned her lungs out and died. And as a result, she basically became a poster child for the anti-drug movement, the the war on drugs propaganda, and obviously probably did more to fuel the fire of the anti-rave scene crusaders than anything else.
Yeah, that is a very unfortunate story there. I could see how in many publications, I'm sure even The Guardian, they probably found a way to put it down on, oh, it's the youth of today, the Gen X, because at that time, most of it was Gen X people going to
Gen
rave.
X, yeah.
They promote all the drug use and what's the word I'm trying to think of? The vice of it all. So therefore, we've got to crack down on it. And eventually, I believe it was 91 or 94, that they would superimpose the Criminal Justice Bill and Order Act in Parliament to try to ensure a lot less of this sort of happens. But what it done was it made people trying to promote raves and whatnot a little harder to try to get their gigs across. But they're still trying to find ways to set it up illegally over in parks. I grew up in Essex and Hertfordshire. You certainly would pick up on a lot of sort of things like that happening. Not to say that I didn't know people who went to such raves and illegal parties, impromptu, whatnot, but you definitely got a feel for the music. One of my neighbours, when I lived over in not too far away from Grays and Thurrock, was a person like that, went to quite a lot of raves herself. She would always pass me some of her remix CDs or bootleg tapes that she would have. And I enjoy every moment of it.
Well, it's that kind of shit that is what it's all about at the end of the day. And while we're talking about music, do you know Chumbawamba?
I'll get knocked down. I'll get knocked out. I don't ever get rid of that. Well, they're very political, or at least they say they are.
No, they're very, very political. But they responded to the whole aftermath, the reaction to Leah Betts' death and how it was used to as a fuel the anti-drug campaign. And basically, they said their own part of saying, "Distorted, you're as likely to die from eating a bay leaf as from an ecstasy tablet." So I mean, yeah, just that's a little tidbit to add in. Just what I would add because, of course, we're talking about music, aren't we?
Oh yes, of course. This is certainly a lot more of an open airscape as far as subject matter is concerned. Because music, you can talk about album covers, the songs in question, or even sampling and whatnot. I know I'm sort of bringing too much topics into the mix right here, but I know when we were saying sampling, that also got a lot of controversy as well. You know, the Verve had to pay out Rolling Stones for trying to use the violin orchestra bit for Bittersweet Symphony, and then Robin Thicke and Katy Perry have gone into court because of misuse of samplings or not giving credit to the people who actually made that particular tune, or it sounded a little too much like a particular song that was made before that. I don't know if it's related to censorship or whatnot, but it is related to the greater sphere of legality.
Yeah, I wouldn't
and
necessarily.
more attitudes.
To be fair, I mean, we've mentioned it, said it once, and it's been mentioned, and it does bear repeating. Of course, it's only censorship when the government or the laws prevent are stopping something from being shown or stopping something being broadcast. I think if I mean, free speech and everything and censorship, it implies that the government can't crack down on this sort of stuff. And it does bear repeating that because a lot of people scream censorship and free speech when it's just like a private company has refused to air their views or refused to platform them, and just it's not. I mean, that distinction has to be made. Otherwise, people are just going to distort everything.
Well, of course. Well, I mean, if you think about that, going on a slightly different topic, Ofcom is quite stringent in regards to what you can or cannot say. You have to provide equal time, or at least the ruling still stands for different sides of opinion being registered and provoked, and it cannot be, if it's a political broadcast and advertising, it is restricted. It's not like in the States where you can just air it every 5 minutes. It's heavily regulated, and you also must provide at least equal time to Labour and Tory, Lib Dem, UKIP, whatnot supporters. That rule does not necessarily apply. But getting off topic there, like you said about the legality of music and whatnot, it does go back to probably one of the greatest cases I am aware of in recent music history. Is one of the greatest Christmas songs ever made in the United Kingdom by an Irish band made by a foul drunkard. And there's a particular lyric that we all know and love where it begins...
We're talking about the Pogues here.
Oh, yes. You scumbag, you maggot, you cheap lousy.
Yeah, we won't say
Happy Christmas, you ass. Thank God it's our last.
Yeah. The word, of course, can be used to describe a certain meatball that's eaten in the UK.
Oh, right there. I know it's Pride Month, so I have to be a little bit careful what I use.
Obviously, we're not going to say it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but again, though, it's not so much like the legal law has forbade them saying it. I think the folks themselves don't want to say it anyway either because they feel that it is problematic.
Exactly. I personally, when I first heard that song, I didn't pick up that it was a foul slur, as well as the other swear words that they use, like arse and slut, junk, and whatnot. It was only a little later in my life that I start realizing, okay, yeah, that's probably not the best word to say in front of people of the queer or LGBT persuasion. But it's a song that I love near and dearly, and it makes me cry. I cannot even listen to that song without tearing up. I don't know what's your experience with that tune growing up. Did you hear it uncut, or was it bold?
Oh, no, I've heard it uncut and everything. I mean, I suppose that when it's Christmas time and it's tis the season, it's a nice seasonal jingle to hear and everything, as every other Christmas song is, that you hear for like umpteen fucking times throughout that December period. Fortunately, we're in June, so we've got a good 6 months left to start hearing all that stuff again.
Exactly. I bet you they won't even play it because of political correctness and whatnot, or they'll at least just play like an instrumental version.
They'll play it. They'll just cut that bit out. They always play that. They never miss a chance.
Well, that's their decision, I suppose. It's still a great tune, whatnot. I mean, I like it more so than Slade's Merry Christmas song, except for
I prefer the Wizard one.
Okay.
No, I've always preferred the Wizard song to the Slade song. I don't know why. It's just got a better rhythm and melody to it.
Right there. What about that Paul McCartney Wings one? The sun is out, the moon is out.
Oh, bollocks to that one.
Here tonight.
Hey, I think we're getting off topic anyway.
Well, actually, it does come back to mind because we just said Paul McCartney and the Beatles, Liverpool, it's right, oh, there, but in that mould. They got into quite a bit of trouble, particularly...
Bigger than Jesus.
Oh, yes, that whole controversy to where it inspired someone to assassinate John Lennon, of all things. And then that one album cover that they got into trouble for that never was really printed after the fact. It was like, Yesterday and Forever. I can't quite remember the title's name, but it had dead babies printed on the album cover.
Plus, of course, there's a song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Oh, I think that one's pretty obvious if you...
well, that's the thing, though. John Lennon
abbreviate it.
I think we know that. I know everyone said, "Oh, it's clear about LSD, isn't it?" It's like, no, it's just about a girl called Lucy and Sky Diamonds. I mean, he may just be saying that to cover himself, but no, it's probably very likely. I mean, he just was. That's what he's writing about, a girl called Lucy, and his son was talking about a girl called Lucy based on Sky Diamonds, and everyone just inferred about it, which can say a lot more about society than it does about any of the artists.
Well, I mean, some people will really interpret songs with certain meanings that they actually weren't intended to even make.
Like Timber Gore.
Exactly. I mean, if she thought that was what the Twisted Sister song was about, I hope to God what she wanted about Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. But because Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer, which is a song which is essentially about Peter Gabriel's penis and how hard it gets and how he can fuck like a machine, they didn't view it that way because it has colourful Aardman animation and it also has animation from Brothers Quay music video, and he's a white musician and it's pop. So they weren't going to target as much as a metal or hip-hop musician.
Well, while I've suddenly had a reminder of something, it just suddenly came to my mind. U.S. presidential hopeful from 1996, Bob Dole, a Republican, so so I think we all know what that is about. He actually had a big gripe against Cannibal Corpse. I'm not too exactly sure what he did, but I think he tried to do the whole PMRC thing against death metal band Cannibal Corpse. And while their lyrics are extremely violent, I mean, have you heard of Cannibal Corpse?
Yes, they actually featured on Ace Ventura.
Ventura, yeah.
That's my first foray into them. And one of them album covers is so graphic, I probably wouldn't even show it in public. It's called Tomb of the Mutilated.
Yeah, it's that song they played as opening track from that album called Hammer Smashed Face. Basically, their song just covers what you expect to hear in horror splatter movies. And obviously you don't take it particularly seriously or anything. But that's the thing, though. I mean, George Fisher, who is now the singer of a band, it was Chris Barnes, and specifically said when addressing the issue, it was like, you don't take this shit seriously. I mean, especially when you look at like the Vatican and everything. I mean, there's loads of like graphic violence art there, and that was like based on real life. But that's considered art. This cheesy stuff, which is considered entertainment, is like, that's what gives censors knickers in a twist.
Well, if they find ways to target certain particular songs and artists, mainly because there's a sense that amongst the elites, I know I'm sounding a bit like a Trump supporter in this regards, they assume that in the case of metal music, it appeals to the lower classes or to the people who have barbaric or sort of primal sympathies, which in turn means they're going to shoot up a school. They even tried doing this with the whole Columbine thing, where they tried targeting Marilyn Manson and whatnot.
I was going to bring that up a bit later on, but I thought we'd get through first. But yeah, carry on.
And then also Judas Priest. There was quite a bit of controversy about that. This is from my mother's generation. My uncle, God bless his soul, he passed away, had the Stained Class record, but he never was warped by the devil and said, kill your parents. That subliminal messaging that one might have heard that inspired him to commit suicide or do some violent acts.
Yeah, they were sued because two of their fans listened to a song of theirs. It wasn't a song that they'd written, actually. It was a cover of a song called Better By You, Better By Me. I can't remember who originally sang it or anything. I could probably just Wikipedia it, but I can't be fucked right now. Anyone in the comments wants to just say who sang the original song, go right ahead. But no, I mean, yeah, I mean, a band tried to prove to that they were the band. Sorry, the family. There was. Sorry, I'll start again. The family tried to sue them, and the prosecution tried to say that there were backward messages saying that if you play it backwards, there were messages telling you to kill yourself. And it's like, okay, first of all, and this is what they said at the time being, if you play a message backward, play a record backwards enough and tell someone there's like a subliminal message, they'll eventually hear it. They tried it with the phrase, I want a peppermint, and eventually the court heard it and the case was dismissed. But the other thing that, the other point, and just big flaw in the whole case, and it was something that the late comedian Bill Hicks brought up, is like, why in the ever-loving fuck would a band want their audience to kill themselves? It's just not really in their interest. It doesn't really do them any benefit. Doesn't benefit them in the long term or even the immediate term. These people buy your freaking albums, are responsible for you having a successful career. Not really gonna do you not much good to you if they're dead.
Oh no, because they wouldn't be able to get in ticket sales.
Exactly.
That's how most bands make their money nowadays, is through touring. So it kind of defeats the purpose. But artists like to be a bit clever with their messages and whatnot. I think in case of Judas, they weren't trying to be satirical or anything, or trying to actually enforce something. They were just making music because that's how the sounded was good. Now, if it was someone like Marilyn Manson, he's put politics in his music quite a bit of times to try and make a point. Fight Song, for example, which was in response to a lot of the school shootings and youth violence that was occurring, because he was blamed for Columbine, Claiborne Harris, and the dissolution of young youth and whatnot.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously he was an easy scapegoat. I mean, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris didn't even listen to freaking Marilyn Manson, apparently. And actually, they preferred German bands like Rammstein and KFMDM, or I can't remember what it is.
KFMDM. I actually am a big fan of that particular band. You should listen to Nile. It's a great album. Industrial.
I think I may have listened to one or two of their stars, but of course, most people in America hadn't even fucking heard of those bands, so they don't get they don't get any flack. But oh no, Marilyn Manson does, because they are allegedly goths, and basically Marilyn Manson was the most famous goth there was. Oh, he got the flack for it. In fact, I don't know if you've seen Bowling for Columbine.
I've seen all of Michael Moore's films. He's one of my favorite documentaries. He actually influenced a lot of the work that I actually do.
Well, fair, but yeah, I mean, I was influenced when I was a bit younger. I feel I've outgrown him a little bit. I find his views a little reductive and everything. He's like a poor man's Chomsky, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Anyway, I was watching Bowling for Columbine, and Marilyn Manson's interviewed about the whole thing, and he's just like, yeah, Christ, I was just an easy target. At the same time that was going on, Clinton was blowing up another country overseas, but he's singing rock and roll songs, and oh gee, he's the bad guy. I mean, and not to mention, of course, a lot of the survivors of Columbine, they actually did like Marilyn Manson, as well as play Doom and do all the things that are blamed. As you can imagine, they were not really too thrilled about having their pastime being blamed for their the ordeal that they had to suffer.
Oh, I actually get that. I mean, people unfortunately like to take things out of context a little bit, and they will focus on one particular thing and say, this is the reason why people have gone downhill. Even us people on the left, we can be guilty of doing that too.
We're not infallible, are we?
No, we're not machines. Or at least we will be when the T-800 machines by Arnold Schwarzenegger comes to the power. But it's not to get off topic there. But it does make me a little curious there. I know for some people listening, it might seem a little bit, they can't relate to it because that was from the 90s. So if we put it in a 2010s perspective,
oh no, Columbine.
Well, if
the 90s, yeah.
Well, if we're putting it through a modern perspective, I know a lot of people like to crack down on Childish Gambino. He's a rapper. He done a music video called "This Is America," and a lot of people misinterpreted that one as being some sort of indictment against American society in general, with the mass shootings and the racial warfare. I know Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. He's one of my favorites. He praised it, but many people misinterpreted it, and I think some music stations banned it or they aired it after the watershed.
Well, I mean, they always do that. Of course, if we're talking about modern hip-hop songs that have got a lot of got a flack, and I'm always glad something does, because it's just nice, because it just makes you think, oh, cool, it's got some dangerous music. That Montero, Call Me By Your Name by Lil Nas X.
Is it the one with the nudity in the prison showers?
No, he goes to hell and he kills Satan.
Oh, that one. I'm not really. I don't listen to a lot of UK Top 40 or Billboard 200 these days.
It was aired at the last year at the Super Bowl. That's where it got so much attention. It got so much uproar because ultra Christian America was just like taken aback by it. I mean, I find it a little bit funny that the idea of Satanism was still riling people up in this day and age after like all the 70s and 80s and the faux Satanism of all these metal bands. But fucking hell, I didn't realize they could still get people, piss people off that much. I thought it was cool.
I thought it was something that was more of the 2000s and the 90s that you start seeing a lot of these sort of evangelical right people getting up in arms about a particular work. But I'm not surprised there, because if you take into context what Lil Nas X is, he is LGBT, he's black, and he is popular with the conservative community to some extent because he's done Old Town Road, which is popular amongst country fans. Fans are conservative. So I guess there was that sort of a schism that they weren't quite what they were expecting with. Well, if they're acting on that, they should talk to Willie Nelson. He's one of the great country musicians, and he was a hardline cannabis smoker. Johnny Cash, he supported indigenous rights. His wife was targeted because they assumed that she was a black woman, even though she was Italian, but she had a swarthy complexion. And he got flack for that by the KKK. So who are they to judge? Them country bastards. I don't listen to country music.
Well, I don't listen to country music. I mean, sure, I'll find some occasional country song that's a toe tapper or something, like that song from No Country for Old Men. But yeah, I mean, obviously, we might be a little bit judgmental ourselves because, you know, we talk about how our music is like associated with drugs or gang violence or Satan or whatever. Now we're saying, well, country music is associated with racist Bible thumping yokels and everything. So,
yeah, I mean, we're no better angels there. But you know, I've got American followers on here, so you kind of have to always pin them down because I have to seem like, according to my British friends, if I don't go hard on Americans, they'll give me hell. I was always bullied for being partially American, so I'm trying to up the ante on it and make myself appear more British than I actually am. Well, no offense.
Well, is that your normal accent that you're speaking with?
Yep, that's the way I talk. I'm not faking it. I mean, I could do an American accent if you want me to, but it sounds a bit forced.
Sweet.
But you know, I've got to appear more British to my my Anglo friends more than anything. I still speak the accent. I prefer EastEnders over General Hospital. I love Alan Partridge and In-Betweeners and Chris Morris. But, you know, grew up also on Simpsons and Dexter's Lab and Johnny Bravo. And a lot of American movies like Toy Story and Space Jam. So I'm kind of have dual loyalty that someone who maybe like you probably doesn't have.
Well, who the hell hasn't bloody grown up on frickin' American culture? I mean, it's pretty much become a monoculture thing. I mean, other other rest of the world's cultures are basically struggling to survive or even compete. But what have we got to compete with Hollywood? I don't know. Anyway, let's get off topic. But
yes, but most of the bands we were talking about on this music podcast were largely American bands. But let's face it, Britain has the monopoly on great music. Make no mistake. And even on the MTV side of things, they certainly do. I remember, well, actually, I'll get on the topic of album covers. What was your experience with them? Were there any ones that scared you or aroused you or confused you for the controversy? Because when I was growing up, there's an album cover that was from Aphex Twin called Richard D. James. It was never, controversial. They didn't ban it or anything, but it scared me. When I was at HMV looking at it, my heart stopped, and I wanted to see, the other dance music albums. It's that Richard D. James one because his evil grin terrified me.
I mean, sorry, which one did you say again?
Aphex Twin's Richard D. James album. That one frightened me when I was a young man. They never banned it or anything, but it did freak me out. And then I was always perplexed at some of the album covers at HMV. Some of them would have full nudity on them. Like there was one from Black Strobe, and I think I even saw the Yoko Ono John Lennon CD where they're completely bare. That caused a shitstorm to where certain sellers, at least in America, would not show the album in its uncut form. They would put black tape.
Oh yeah, it's the same with a band called Carcass. They were a death metal grindcore band. Grindcore is like another version, extreme form of metal or punk music. It's kind of like death metal, only nowhere near as musically good. And one of their early albums, which went under the subgenre of gore grind. Don't ask her. I can't even begin to start that shit. They will not show the covers for it. Unlike the Cannibal Corpse ones, which are very comic book in nature, it was far more realistic. In fact, there's always one big meme that's been going around the internet and everything. They'll take they'll show you the cover of a Cannibal Corpse album, just about any of them, and that has a parental advisory sticker in it. Just like, well, I'm so glad it's got a parental advisory sticker on, because I would never have guessed it's inappropriate.
Well, you can't put two and two together to realize, in the case of Tomb of the Mutilated, that there's a graphic sex act that's going on involving mutilated corpses. You have to be pretty satanic to think that's not offensive in some level. Would you show that to a 5-year-old? It would give them nightmares.
Well, I wouldn't show it, no, but I think we can. I think we could do some of that, Mark. That the album is going to contain some not kid-friendly material, and then you could turn it around and look at the names of this album of the songs. The first two are called "Hammer Smashed Face" and then "I Come Blood," and there's another one at the end which is called "Entrails Ripped from a Virgin's Cunt." So,
yeah, that's pretty ballsy.
Yeah, it's all done there to push buttons. I mean, you can tell the members will just piss themselves laughing because, it depends how serious you take it. And I don't take it seriously. It's far too ridiculous to be taken seriously. But, there's been plenty of albums that have rubbed people the wrong way. I mean, obviously, when I was younger and I first saw Cannibal Corpse album covers, just the name Cannibal Corpse, it always rubbed me the wrong way a bit. It wasn't until I was 23 I started listening to them. I remember my brother had a Cypress Hill poster in his room, which showed a bunch of skeletons smoking weed and everything. And looking back at it now, it looks cool as fuck and everything, if not a little bit cheesy. When I was a kid, I always found it a little bit on the nose. But my brother is 7 years older than me. He would have been like 13, 14, about 6 or 7. So obviously my mind couldn't really process what I was saying. Not to mention, once I saw this album to cover to an Iron Maiden album. I can't remember what it was called now, but it had one of the most fucked up images on it. I'm just going to quickly see if I can Wikipedia it right now. Iron Maiden discography.
So those were your experiences with album covers and whatnot. Because it sounds like your experience was a lot more wild than mine. I mean, the most edgy thing I ever saw was, accidentally, someone had a copy of Bow Wow Wow. It was like a new wave group, and it depicted like a 40-year-old that was naked. Made me uncomfortable, knowing that was what it was. I told him, dispose of that, or otherwise I'll call the 999 on you. And then Dr. Dre's Chronic, which depicted a cannabis leaf. I didn't know certainly what the hell marijuana or cannabis was, but until later in my life, I thought, oh, I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand what was all the I'm smoking them every day, getting high on the 420 and the OG and the Kush. And to this day, I don't even smoke the stuff, but I know almost everyone who does, even people who's right wing.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's not controversial to be smoke weed nowadays. I mean, if the state you're in has it legalized it yet?
In my time in America, California has legalized it recreationally since 2016. It's legalized it for medicinal use since 96.
Is that where you are?
I don't tell people where I'm located, but at least in my time in California, yes. When I was there, it was legal.
I know.
You have to be 21.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, part of me wants to go back to America, just one of those states, or just go to Canada where it's fully legalized, just so I can get stoned. It's going to be like even better than going to Netherlands. By the way, the Iron Maiden album was called The X Factor, and
how appropriate! There's a stupid bloody music show of the same name. Except
this from '95. Yeah, but what was I going to bloody say? But you talk about Dr. Dre, and of course, I mean, part of what's known as gangster rap, which has always rubbed the censors the wrong way. Of course, Dr. Dre was from NWA, and the FBI actually tried to get NWA to stop performing.
Nope, you're right, because of their anti-police and sort of almost black nationalist lyrics. They thought,
which, by the way, has stood the test.
Intrigue young people to promote these sort of left-leaning causes, even though Ice Cube isn't that left-leaning. He actually is kind of friends with Trump.
Yeah,
so that's funny.
Oh yeah, well that's very much. That's obviously that's quite cringe when he's actually done that. But I mean, of course, back then, and the lyrics of "Fuck the Police" have really stood the test of time. Now that I think about it, I mean, what's been going on
from Rodney King to George Floyd and Tamir Rice and many other names, still even to this day, the message is still quite potent. And there will be stations, I'm sure probably even in the UK, that will boulderize the lyrics or perhaps not even play it to begin with because it's so vulgar or it's too political. They'll say it's too woke nowadays instead of saying, oh, it's too vulgar, we can't air it at a certain time. I know Cop Killer is a song that comes to mind that no one dared play.
Ice-T. Oh, yeah. I mean, by Ice-T, that got basically just, banned from radio. I say banned. Basically, no radios would play it and everything. So, I mean, they
helped sell his Body Count album, which is his metal thrash side of things. Because most people think he's rap, but he's actually done thrash in his
totally.
time.
Yeah, I'm aware about this.
He worked with Suicidal Tendencies and Anthrax, just like Public Enemy. But yes, that got a shitstorm. They still threatened litigation against him. And I think the album that he made after that, called Home Invasion, it didn't sell as much because of all the stigma surrounding it. And let's not forget Two Life Crew, done as nasty as they want to be. That caused a shitstorm to where they put them in court. They won eventually, but they never really succeeded since then because it was Broadcast Florida wanted to stop As Nasty as Wanna Be from playing at music stores because of lyrics saying me so horny or I'm gonna fuck you so right up. Sex explicit at best.
Well, exactly. And of course, I mean, we talked about our NWA, and of course, Dr. Dre was part of them. But of course, Dr. Dre was a person who paved way for Eminem. And of course, we mentioned Marilyn Manson earlier on. And of course, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, around the turn of millennium, basically, it's those two, Marilyn Manson and Eminem, who were the two like public enemies number one, who were just every last moral guardian was just throwing an absolute shit fit over them. I think over here it was more Eminem and everything. I remember one of the my teachers at school told one of my friends he was not to have Marshall Mathers LP CD in school. So just because I can't remember if it's because of the language or because of like what it might promote or anything, but yeah. And of course, Eminem just raked in the album sales because he got all this free publicity of all these twats just throwing a hissy fit about it.
No, you're absolutely right. I was there just like you. A lot of my mates were into Eminem. One could argue they were trying to be some sort of, sorry if this is offensive, a white guy trying to think he's black, or what they call a wigger. But I thought it was funny, his little shtick that he was doing, say with Fred Durst, and they was even play 8 Mile when that film came out. I was on the bus. I was, go to like secondary or whatnot, and they kept playing that particular "Lose Yourself" as a man, you want to have a chance to blow because opportunity comes once in a lifetime. You better lose yourself. And they kept playing that song, and I don't think they even censored any of the lyrics because they were so obsessed with, this bloke and whatnot. It seems like we had it easier than your school did, which is quite surprising. One of the schools I went to, one of the kids bought Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and they slapped a 12 on the video game, and they only got into trouble ultimately when they started hearing F-bombs and seeing blood being played on the projector screen when they're playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on Xbox. I couldn't believe my own eyes that happened.
Well, we could do a whole bloody episode just on freaking video games. If we're talking about censorship, I mean, what gets more freaking flack now? It's not films or freaking music. That's so 20th century. It's all the bloody video games now that get the old boomers knickers in a twist and basically get them like riled up. And of course, it just makes you want it. But we can talk about it in another podcast. But yeah, I mean, I can't remember what point I was going to try and make and everything. But yeah, and of course, all they ever did was, I mean, the moral guardians never seem to realize every time they make a piss fit about something. I don't know if that's a word I even just said there. About something. Every time they try to get something banned, every time they, get outraged, all they do is make people garner more interest into it. It's the same with films, music, video games, books, comics, TV shows. I mean, it's
and
ridiculous.
Radio personalities like Joe Rogan and Steve Crowder.
Well, there's that as well. I mean, one of the oldest forms of this happening was with Alice Cooper. Mary Whitehouse, he came to play over in the UK, and Mary Whitehouse basically got his show banned and everything due to the violent content. As a result, Schools Out shot straight to number 1 over here. So much so that Alice Cooper sent Mary Whitehouse flowers because in gratitude for her getting him to number 1.
Actually, that is quite a hilarious irony. For all of her Christian Festival of Light bashing, she actually helped him implicitly, even though she probably didn't know that she was helping him as far as sales were concerned. So I guess you're absolutely right. I mean,
you would think in the 50. Well, sorry, I'll let you know. I just want to say, you'd think in the 50+ years they might have fucking learnt something by now, but they never do.
No, I'm afraid not. It's usually the artists that don't do as well, or the ones that they play it safe. They play A, B, C, then A, B, C. The whole general chorus, safe lyrics about love or, dancing in the flowers, and then they disappear. It's usually the ones that tend to be the most controversial that tend to stay with you. I mean, I could remember Prodigy's Firestarter. Now, certainly not as controversial as Smack My Bitch Up, but I know a lot of people with children, they were presumed to be scared by that music video of Keith Flint dancing around with a red, white, and blue American T-shirt or something, using a sword and jumping around, and it was dark and it had a moody atmosphere. And then the Daily Mail go on an uproar about it, but it's a song that keeps playing over and over, and the music video is certainly well known, at least in my time when I saw it on MTV2 and Kerrang and MTV Dance. But yes, it's funny how people perceive things, and then on
a subject of controversy and how it drives up sales. I don't think it's as big a surprise that around the end of the 80s, turn of the 90s, the biggest selling hard rock band, were also the most controversial one, Guns N' Roses.
Well, of course, they also had the killer sounds, but they also outrageous in their own right. I don't see them as controversial really, because I keep getting Sweet Child O' Mine, but I think Mr. Brownstone is the one you're referring to because it had the heroin reference.
Well, there's that, and there's a lot of swearing on that Absolute Destruction album for the time, so that obviously got some attention. But yeah, they were renowned for their rock and roll antics. They did an unbelievable amount of drugs. Axl not so much, but Steve Adler, their first drummer, did so many drugs, so much heroin. They had to kick him out of the starting band. And it's like, if you're getting kicked out of, if they had to kick him out of band for his drug abuse, but Slash got to stay, flipping heck, he must have done something. He must have been pretty bad. But and of course, there's Axl storming off stage, refusing to turn up and causing riots, and that was just. It's funny. I remember seeing him at Download 06, and at one point Axl went off stage for a bit, saying we're going to have a little break, and of course he was off stage for quite some time, and we just thought, oh god, he has just stormed off stage in front of 90,000 people who are all sitting in the sweltering sun, getting pissed up, just waiting to see Axl Rose. They're going to fucking riot. They didn't, thank god. He got back on stage actually and dragged out a 2.5-hour concert, which really wasn't that good. But all in all, though, yeah. But considering Axl's personality, I mean, sometimes you went to a Guns N' Roses concert, you're almost like just spilling a roulette wheel to see if he would actually turn up, and if he did turn up, would he actually stay there for duration, and would you get to leave in one fucking piece, either not in a stretcher or not in a bloody cop car?
Okay. I didn't know Axl Rose was that one. All I know is that he'd done that song My World from Usual Illusion 2, and he'd done it while high on magic mushrooms. And people say that's the worst Guns N' Roses song ever made. I think it's the best because it has an industrial Nine Inch Nails Bjork type of sound to it.
Sorry, which song did you say again?
My World. It's on Usual Illusion 2.
Yeah, I know too. That's not right. So obviously my personal favorite is You Could Be Mine. That's actually my favorite song ever. And not just because it was attached to Terminator 2. I just think it was a damn great song and everything. But that's probably the song that made me fall in love, not just with Guns N' Roses, but with hard rock and heavy metal in general.
Hey, more power to you. I like some of their songs as well, but I didn't have quite the attachment to them as far as what I would call Kerrang music, like I did with Faith No More, which kind of came out around the same time. They were more sort of the alternative side, because they've done Epic and Fallen to Pieces.
Oh, they're an alt rock, alt rock, alt metal. God, that doesn't sound good when you say alt followed by an R word nowadays. But yeah, I mean they were a bit derivative of Chili Peppers, but yeah, I mean, Faith No More are good. The song Epic's great. They've done some other good songs. Well, the album The Real Thing from '89, that's a damn good album. Everyone says it's about Angel Dust, but no, it's about freaking The Real Thing.
Well, I mean, I've sampled out songs from both Real Thing and Angel Dust, and even King for a Day, Fall for a Lifetime on my actual music myself. That's how influential they are to me. Also, because Mike Patton, I wish I could be him in real life as far as sex appeal is concerned, because women seem to moon all over him with his almost Gomez from Addams Family type of ways. But that's just me getting off topic there. But most of the music I grew up, because I know you talk about your favorite song. Anyone who's asked what my favorite song is, I actually don't have one. But if I had to throw in the towel or something, one of the first songs I ever liked when I was growing up was Future Sound of London's Papua New Guinea. And then I also like a lot of Björk, particularly Venus as a Boy. It's Oh So Quiet. And I think Army of Me, those are one of the earlier stuff. And then also the first album I ever owned was actually a parental advisory album, but my parents allowed me to bought it, and they didn't even check my ID. And this was back in Lakeside, in Thurrock, Essex. It was the Gorillaz' debut.
Oh, that's a cooler. That's a song. That's one of Clint Eastwood on, isn't it?
Yep, that's the one. It's an album.
That is a good song. I will defend that. I will attest to that. I will defend that song with death. That is a banger.
It certainly is. That was, I can't listen to that album, otherwise I start crying. It's just like Toy Story, because it makes me nostalgic. Because that one, alongside Eminem's Music Classics, were the first two albums I ever bought with my pocket change. Because most of the songs that I listened to prior to that were mostly stuff I saw on MTV or through the tapes that my father had. Because I grew up on a lot of sort of new wave and post-punk stuff, and acid house and rave and jungle and house. Those were my jams. Now I know those sort of genres don't really create the kind of controversy that an otherwise a metal or hip hop record would. But I remember the first controversial
acid house does.
Well,
it's called Acid House. I mean, flipping heck. I mean, it's gonna. In fact, it came from a second Summer of Love, which is kind of fitting because the first Summer of Love featured a lot of acid rock. So I think everything falls into another. We need a third Summer of Love with acid something else.
I doubt it would happen because of COVID, and also most people like to be on their phones all the time. No one wants to meet each other anymore. And because of AIDS, people are freaked out about having free sex and whatnot. They would just rather masturbate.
That was back.
The hentai.
That was back in the 80s as well. I mean, when the second Summer of Love, the 80s was like shit scared of AIDS. That's kind of probably one time where it's not that great time to be nostalgic for what everyone makes it out to be.
No, you're absolutely right. But here's the thing. There's actually a report about it, with all these uproarious music. Nicki Minaj saying, look at my butt, my anaconda don't. Gen Z people have less sex than millennials and Gen X.
Yeah, they also do less drugs, which is just ironic considering how much less militant and overzealous we are in opposing them drugs nowadays.
They're even less likely to be alcohol consumers. How can you believe that? For a generation that's supposedly so woke and so left-wing, they're not really that left-wing, or at least they seem like the generation of, we don't want to take too much risk, I'll put it that way. Because
one could say, because, I mean, the Victorians have a reputation for being quite puritanical and everything, but before them, the Georgians, Edwardians, I don't fucking know, were absolute libertines hedonists who just got fucked up left, right, and centre on, well, everything, and were just boning and shagging and left, right, and centre. So the Victorians probably grew up looking at that and were disgusted, so that's probably why they got like that. I reckon Gen Z are probably looking at millennials and Gen X and thinking the same. Especially Gen X, because they almost drugged up hedonistic generation on record.
Well, they brought Nirvana to them. That's why.
Well, yeah, and they listened to Guns N' Roses and they listened to all that freaking happy hardcore shit. I mean, it's just drugs. So, yeah, maybe the younger generation just got a little bit disgusted watching the older generations acting like a bunch of pissed up slags and don't want to actually emulate that anymore.
No, you're probably right to some extent. Even, I'm a 90s born millennial, and I'm still quite cautious about doing things. I've told you publicly on here, I don't really drink that much. I don't use tobacco or cannabis. I don't do hard drugs. I get my high from the sounds. That's how I thrive on things. I don't know about you. You're a little older than me, and also you're a little bit more flexible. No, I mean, the rock and roll lifestyle is pretty much sex and drugs and obviously rock and roll. They made a movie about Ian Dury, and that's what the title was about. I know we talked about Ian Dury on a Lover podcast. He got on a shitstorm for making Spasticus Autisticus. They banned it on BBC and whatnot because it made light of people with a certain disability and whatnot. But well, speaking about that, on a more sort of light-hearted level, I know you said the most disturbing album cover for you was like something from Carcass. What's the most sexiest album cover you can think of?
Well, there was one of the I think it was Enema of a State by Blink 182, and they've got that a famous porn star then dressed up in a sexy nurse outfit, and that was always quite nice to look at. Then again, a lot of those teen pop artists back then always had their rather sensual and sexy looking art codes, like Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera. I mean, it is really disturbing how much they sexualized Britney Spears early on, considering she was only 17. And
exactly, I found that quite creepy myself. But I hate her music. I hate Christina. I hate S Club and Spice Girls.
Well, join the club, dude. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. When I was 12, I was actually a big fan of the Spice Girls, and because that's just sort of a thing I was like, mostly because I fancied the fuck out of them and everything. But I was going through that.
Well, if it's Posh Spice you're referring to, then I won't hold it against you. If it's Posh Spice,
Ginger Spice, it was my favourite.
Okay, well, is that Jerry Halliwell, not Victoria Beckham?
There's Jerry Halliwell.
Okay.
Yeah. But we also noticed though because she had massive tits. But let's not get on that because it's probably a little bit sexist. But I mean, obviously, most grown men, really detest twee pop music and everything. I mean, it's something you grow out of the time you start going through puberty and you start getting into the edgier stuff. And we start hating on it more and more because it's popular with teenage girls, and anything that's popular with teenage girls is automatically lame by default because we live in a very ageist and sexist society.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, Spice Girls will never be held up in the same sort of camp as Rolling Stones or the Beatles, even though many people do hold Spice World, the movie, and that. I tell you what I want, what I really, really want. I tell you what it was so to a high regard there. I hated that song. I couldn't stand people trying to dress up as Mel B or Jelly Halliwell, but I know it's very nostalgic for a certain group of British millennials like us to remember that song and that film when it came out. But
totally. And although for us over in Britain, but they didn't really take off so well in America. A rival girl group came a year later called All Saints, and they're a bit more sort of quote unquote down to earth and everything. In the sense they didn't dress up and everything. They had more of an R&B or soul sound to them. And
they've had one of their songs on the beach. That's a movie that us, older millennials and Gen X love the beach. I saw it quite late in my life, but I love the soundtrack. Danny Boyle of Trainspotting, he certainly has a good ear for music, so I'm not one to judge there. Speaking of Danny Boyle and Trainspotting, Underworld's Born Slippy. You can't go wrong.
Well, Born Slippy. I don't know if I know that one too much. Just trying to think what else other topics are to cover, really. Because if we want to go back, talk about the censorship or attempts to censorship of music, you can't really. You probably have to go back to the 1950s when rock and roll first started, and how the very right-wing American Christian just hated it because it was because of the devil's music, and of course influenced by black culture, which Elvis was appropriating. So of course that got the old Greatest Generation types in a tizzy and everything.
You're absolutely right. Well, they're going to do an Elvis film in a few weeks, and they're probably going to reference the whole Jared Lips, thank you very much. Oh, my blue suede shoes. Anytime I do Elvis, it sounds like Johnny Bravo. I don't know why, but yeah, he certainly got a lot of flack for doing that. And in later perspectives, because we're a little bit more woke now, people say, oh, he's culturally appropriating black music.
Well,
but you have to take into account, in the US, it was still very much segregated. And they would get white artists to perform black songs in order to try to sell and make it easier for the audience to appreciate more. Daniel Boone was one of those names. And on the other side of the pond, you had Lulu. She would cover a few songs here and there that were made by African Americans to make it more palatable to people from Tupelo or Springfield, Illinois. Hell, even Sacramento, California.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you're talking about basically the Purity Squad and the Censor Squad and everything, and their attempts to stifle music and everything, you can't. It really, I mean, you can't. It doesn't get more extreme than when you went. Then going back to the beginning, where well, it's not really beginning because you could go back to God knows what. I mean, you could go back to freaking Oliver Cromwell's Britain and him basically banning music altogether because the Puritans hated music. But obviously, rock and roll, the invention of it in the 1950s, right-wing America just hating it and everything, thinking it's devil's music. And it's just sort of spiraled from there. It's all just a rinse and repeat of the same thing and everything. Just that now that films became more controversial and we've got more and more realistic video games, and of course, blaming music's just become old hat, and yeah, we've got other things to piss their pants over.
I think more people nowadays are more freaked out by what a celebrity does online. Like Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars, then more so than the Joker is going to start an incel uprising, or Childish Gambino mocked America. But for anyone who is curious, rock and roll, by its innuendo, it does imply people sleeping with one another, like rocking and rolling around in the bed. Most people tend to forget its actual origins and meaning, but actually that's what it is. I know on a certain level, because jazz and bebop and doo-wop was popular there, a lot of people also blame jazz music for the cultural miscegenation of the American public. It's promoting all these jungle bunnies to sleep with white women through their saxophone music and whatnot. It's evil. It's promoting even reefers. Reefers slang for cannabis.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's that, like the term reefer madness that came out around that time. Well, can you still hear me?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I just had to have a sip. My mouth was a bit dry there, but
well, that's fair play. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and let's face it, there may always be some form of music that can just affect the censors, but I think in order to keep society progressing forward and keep challenging the perceptions of the human condition, if that makes any sense, you're going to have to basically be pushing what's the boundaries of what's acceptable to an extent, especially when music. And there's always one sort of saying: if your parents and your teachers and all these squares, as they say, aren't freaking getting outraged by your form of rock and roll, your music and everything, your art, are you really doing it right?
Probably not. Probably not, I would suppose.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you're always going to have your like middle of the road stuff and everything, but as society has to progress and the humanity has to progress, art has to progress, and that's always going to be pushing against societal prejudices and norms and everything, and it's going to be controversial, and there's always going to the reactionary censors are going to try to push back, but that's just part and parcel of it.
Oh, absolutely. If they're not cracking down on left-wing Antifa extremists, they're cracking down on Pussy Riot. They were a Russian punk band that has been blacklisted by Putin for their outspoken lyrics and also sexual content and politics. I know we probably should have talked about them a lot more, but that's as much as we have to say on that matter, because right now with the current war in Ukraine, their music is probably much more important now than it ever has been. With everything that fucking Pierre the Great S cunt we call Putin, which sounds like a French swear word, putain, is doing.
Well, it sounds like a Canadian dish as well. But I mean, apart else, I mean, Russia is currently in the grips of a very reactionary culture and a very reactionary form of government. So we are kind of lucky in the West that we have a slightly more, well, say slightly, simply more liberal society where you won't just be arrested because you staged a protest in a church. Well, maybe breaking into, you might get something, but not like what happened to Pussy Riot. It's certainly they've got a much more bigger fight to fight than most of us will in the West. Although under Trump, we probably had a lot of people have had something to say. But I think one of the things we said, because for all the attempts to try and censor music, try to crack down music, they really haven't done it in the same way, or at least gone to the same lengths they have done with film and with video games. Because it's one thing you're lucky for kids growing up buying music. They don't have to deal with age ratings. Like there's no BBFC or MPAA or PEGI or ESRB for music.
There isn't. I know on some retailers, like back in the day, like Best Buy and Circuit City in America, they would card you if you're buying parental advisory albums. Walmart wouldn't even carry them. But in my time growing up in England, I was never carded or was told you can't buy this album because it's parental advisory. Because I bought Outkast, Speaker Box, and Love Below. I bought Gorillaz, Demon Days, and the Debut, and Tom York's The Erased. They all were albums that had F words or mature content, but no flagging, no HMV or FOP, Virgin Megastore. But
yeah,
you're right.
Why would they? Because if they don't. I think because basically legally they don't have to do that because they can say what they want, so they're gonna. I mean, you just profit at the end of the day.
The only sort of system that really applies to it where there isn't much in the way of censorship or age restrictions, aside from music, is the theatre. You can go watch Titus Andronicus, a play by Shakespeare that's very graphic, without age restriction.
And books and comics.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, at the same time, why would you want to give a copy of the Elfen Lied manga to a 5-year-old? They usually carry like an age warning on manga, but yes, most like books, you can get Clockwork Orange. I read that when I was 17 at sixth form, and I wasn't banned from reading it. Can you believe that? You can get Clockwork Orange at the library at your sixth form or your secondary school and not get flagged.
That is pretty. That is quite surprising. Then again, I suppose you're 18; they're not going to ask too many questions.
Well, I mean, I was 17 at the time, so yeah, it's a bit surprising there because I don't know what it was like at your sixth form or
I didn't
even
go.
at secondary.
I didn't go to sixth form school. I went to a college.
Okay, well, did you have stuff like Clockwork Orange or American Psycho in your library?
I didn't see it, I have to admit. I mean, it may have been there, but I wouldn't have noticed.
All right. I was just a little bit curious, that's all. But yes, it's certainly very weird how they apply for music regulations and censorship. I know in Britain as well, because TV doesn't have any sort of age restrictions or resignations like you get in the States with TV 14 and MA, we do have the watershed. If it airs after 9 or 10 o'clock, that means keep the kids well away.
That is true.
And I remember on MTV, there would be a lot more stuff that was a bit more edgy and whatnot. I know we haven't talked much about music videos on this particular podcast, but there was some videos in question, aside from the Prodigy one I keep talking about, that definitely spooked me or caught me by surprise. There was one time I was channel surfing, and MTV2 had on a music video where a guy was dancing around and touching his cock and masturbating, and I thought, whoa, I probably shouldn't have been seeing that 13, but yeah, it certainly caught me by surprise. And then there was some animated music videos that were certainly a lot more raunchy than I was used to, including one for Tenacious D, which was involved, the same guy done Ren and Stimpy, and it showed them the devil having sex with a devil girl, and Jack Black and Kyle Gass in cartoon form, saying, "I want to fuck her gently, I want to suck her
Oh yeah,
toes." Yeah.
oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that was funny. Any, yeah. Anyhow, I think we've covered all that we need to cover, all that we can cover. So, do you want to wrap it up there?
Oh yes. I think we've said our piece for most of the time right here. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I don't think we're going to be coming up with something new, at least for a while, unless you want to talk about superheroes. I would be a little bit of an unknown on that one. I mean,
I
I've
was
taught you
thinking,
about the Incredibles on
yeah,
that.
we could talk. Well, I was thinking video games could be the next one. That could be so.
That one you probably have to do with someone else. I'm a little afraid because of I know about SimCity 3000. Most of the games I played were 3, 7, and 12, or 11 Elps. Sorry.
No problem. All right. Well, no problem. As always. Okay. Well, just keep me posted when you've got another topic to discuss at length.
All right, then. The same for you, and hope everyone enjoys themselves. Try to stay safe out there. And if you do enjoy Glasto, do check out Sleaford Mods. If they are playing, don't check out on these other bands. I don't like new bands anyways. But and also, I forgot to even say, oh yeah, sexiest album cover ever made is one that's not even erotic. Kate Nash is made of bricks.
Okay, that's brilliant.
All right then. Well, till then, peace.
Peace.